I'm honored to be speaking to you today about our journey in bringing narrative experiences to immersive media. Our backgrounds are deeply rooted in feature animated film production and storytelling. Our Chief Creative Officer, Eric Darnell, was the writer-director of the Madagascar movies when he was at DreamWorks, and our CTO also hails from DreamWorks, and before that at Pixar, where he has spent his entire career working on animation technology. We're taking that collective experience and bringing it into the world of virtual reality. We found that VR is a very powerful medium for storytelling, and one that is very distinct, and I think you've heard this from other speakers, from film, television, or games. As a studio, we've launched 4 projects over the past 3 years. Our first film, Invasion, was released in 2016. It's the story of a cute little bunny named Chloe who defends the Earth against evil alien invaders. The second film was a follow-up to Invasion that was released in 2017. It's called Asteroids, where you follow those 2 aliens up onto their ship. And in 2018, we showcased an immersive VR theater piece at Tribeca called Jack. And Crow, our 4th piece, is actually launching today on Oculus in about 6.5 hours. So please download it on your Rift, Gear, or Go. For us, the true power of storytelling is the ability to elicit a profound emotional experience through connections with characters. It's why at the movies we laugh, we cry, we jump in horror. It really is something that creates a sense of stepping into the shoes of the character in that narrative and wanting to know what happens next. You care about those characters. Take the example of a little girl crying on a park bench. In film, you would really not expect to get up out of your seat and to help her. You may care deeply about her, and you may sympathize or empathize, but there's really no action that you expect to take. In a game, you would interact with the girl, particularly if it was required to get onto the next level. But that empathy is not a prerequisite to action. You often interact out of self-interest or ego, i.e. you want to win or get onto that next level. And in life, if you're a good person, you'll probably take action. You'll go over to the girl, comfort her, and say, hey, where are your parents? How can I help you? And that motivation is not driven by self-interest. It's more driven by compassion or empathy in action. We believe that VR has the potential to elicit that empathy of film, the interactivity of games, and the motivations of real life. In real life, we have very, very high standards. Reality has rules that can be hard to duplicate in a virtual environment. But we don't have those same expectations for animation. Animation creates its own reality, its own set of rules, so to speak. Animation in VR provides not only the potential to suspend belief, but also the ability to interact in a believable way. The characters can look you in the eye. They can respond to your movement actions in a believable way, and they can encourage a deeper connection through social cues such as mirroring. In VR, you can matter in the narrative in a way that no other medium has enabled to date. We were surprised by the success of our first film. It received critical acclaim out of the gate and has become one of the top downloaded VR experiences. We believe what made that experience so successful was Chloe. Everyone fell in love with the bunny. People connected with the bunny in ways that they just wouldn't do in film. It was a light bulb for us about storytelling in VR. Chloe stole the show. She really did. The film was actually about the 2 aliens, and Chloe the bunny ends up coming out of her cave to run up to you on the ice. She looks you right in the eye. And on high-end headsets, she'll follow you as you kind of track around in that 3-dimensional space. When this high contact happens in Invasion, everyone's eyes are glued on the bunny. She has your full attention. And though This is VR, and there's no frame, and you can look anywhere you want in a virtual environment. When the bunny's looking at them, they look right back at the bunny. Let me see if this clip will run for you. Some people even, wave hi to Chloe, and they want to bounce around and play with her and try to pet her. And they're actually convinced that we have a really high-end AI behind that, and that it's responding to their cues. Now, we had eye tracking in terms of her looking at where you're looking, but that's it. And why is the audience reacting this way? It's because the bunny is acknowledging them as part of her world. And if you allow yourself to suspend your disbelief, you are in her world and you matter. You also wield great power by having a character break eye contact with you and look at something outside of the audience's field of view. Characters' eyes can lead the viewer's eyes, in this case, towards an incoming spaceship. This has become a very important technique for us at Baobab, as we tell stories in 360 with no frame to direct the viewer's attention. We like to call it acting like a magician. And this will show you Chloe now looking at the incoming spaceship and directing your view up to watch it coming in. We like to call this acting like a magician. So when a magician does their performance and they want you to look at them, they look at you. And when they want you to look at something else, they look off. And we use this technique, I believe, successfully in Invasion. It's intuitive to us as humans in terms of how we interact with each other. Our second film, Asteroids, follows the two aliens, Mac and Cheese, up onto their spaceship. And there you meet their lovable dog, Peas. It's a robot dog. And you learn that they're not the evil aliens hell-bent on dominating the galaxy, but they're two beings who care deeply about each other. You play this Class 3 menial task robot who always seems to be getting in the way. While you're a secondary character in the story, we give you the option, but not the requirement, to play a meaningful role. If you decide to take action in this story, you can actually play the hero and save Cheese the alien. You can, through your actions, transform yourself in the eyes of the aliens. And you become a meaningful member of the team. So this animation shows the reaction to you if you've actually taken actions to help. So in this clip, you can see they actually, even though they're speaking alien gibberish, they look up to you as having saved the day. But just like in real life, you can do this scene without actually taking action. And you'll see what happens.
Penasip. Penaj oi sip. Penaj oi Profganibus in.
So it's subtle here, but the characters actually now focus on the robot dog, Peas, as the hero, and not you. And that's a big difference emotionally, and a big difference in your relationship to the characters. And as we like to say, that's just like real life. Putting a viewer as a secondary character puts the focus on the story on the other characters. The viewer's choices in this case are not revelatory in terms of the story outcome. The story is driven primarily by what Mac and Cheese and Peas need. Mac learns that his friendship with Cheese is more valuable than a clean windshield. Your choices have an impact and affect the way the other characters think about you, but the resolution of the story is exactly the same. And if you make choices, you can actually matter to those characters. Our fourth project, Crow, the Legend, is based on a Native American tale that has been passed on orally through the generations. This project really resonated with us as a studio. It touches on themes of community, self-sacrifice, and accepting one's flaws that make each of us unique as individuals. And here's a quick look into the world of Crow.
There was a time when it was always summer, and life for the animals was peaceful and worry-free. Then, one day, winter came to the forest for the very first time.
I don't like this.
We gotta do something.
Calm down.
Someone must fly past the moon and the sun to where the stars dwell, to the one who creates everything by thinking.
Hello?
And convince him or her to make it warm for us once again.
Oh,
I know he'll make any sacrifice to save us.
let's see what you're really made of. Crow!
So in this story, the Earth and its animal inhabitants have been blessed with a carefree existence in an eternal spring of sorts before the time of man. But the great creator decides to bring winter to the planet for the first time, begging the question in this story, what if you could actually be part of that change as the viewer? So we give viewers the role of the spirit of the seasons, and when darkness descends on the planet for the first time, you can make it snow. This interactivity, as we've designed it, serves the story and is key to building your connection with the characters by actually changing the environment that they live in. We put a lot of thought into creating a relatively simple interactivity in order for it to feel effortless to the viewer. We didn't want it to require that you are an experienced gamer, you know how to use a dual joystick controller, and you could mash multiple buttons in a key sequence. We really wanted it to have mass appeal as opposed to focusing on a particular niche. And as important, we wanted that interactivity to be consistent as it evolved through the narrative. And this is the first act in the story where you, as the god of the seasons, bring about winter.
But then one day, the spirit of the seasons decided it was time to bring the very first winter to the forest. And so it was that the very first snows fell, and the lives of the animals would never be the same.
And so this ended up being a really satisfying interactive experience for
But then
people.
one day, the spirit of the seasons decided it was time to bring the very first winter to the forest.
Oh, looks like we're replaying that same scene. In the second act, when the crow flies off beyond the sun and the moon to find the creator, we wanted the viewer to be able to play an active part in space. We kept throwing around a lot of different ideas around what that would look like, and we were inspired a lot by things like a lot of the great space operas that we've all seen in the movies. And so we wanted to allow users or viewers to conduct an orchestra made out of the stars and the asteroids themselves. And it was important for us, if you were going to be a conductor of the music, that it was additive and not detracting. I mean, it can't be like a beat-based, a rhythm-based music game where you're having bad chords sounding discordant in the actual experience. So we allowed you that if you hit things on the beat, little kind of magical Easter eggs would pop out. Stars would light up, planets would spin, and asteroids would sing. And this asteroid scene was broken into 9 pre-composed tracks. Each track sounds good over the bass track by itself or in combination with the others. But the bass track itself had to sound good on its own in case the viewer decided not to do anything. The end result is an incredibly satisfying experience as the viewer helps Crow make his way through the last stage of his journey to find the creator.
Skunk could see this. It's got to be the place. A couple more flats, bro.
This was super interesting in being very different in terms of how viewers interacted with that scene. In the first scene with the snow, you saw people just waving their arms above the head saying, hey, make it snow, make it snow. And they really just wanted to hang out playing in the snow. And this one, you found people just actually becoming conductors, playing the music. It became very natural, which was very satisfying to them. And in the last act, we faced a lot of different issues in terms of the arrival of spring. This is where you would wave your arms, the snow would disappear, and you'd bring flowers back up. We placed little animations of flowers around the set in various points, and we found through user testing that people had a really hard time filling the specific areas with flowers. So we ended up creating tracers that helped users in terms of waving their hands to the right spots and would automatically find their way if they weren't going to the right place to allow the blooming flowers to come to fruition. And so this is kind of like an effect of throwing pollen around the environment. But again, took a while, but I think we landed on something very satisfying for users to go through the experience from winter to space to spring. And so Native Americans have this saying, mita ko ya o ya scene, which means we are all related. We are all connected. And we actually think this captures the power of storytelling in VR incredibly well. In VR, you are connected with the world. You are immersed and can look anywhere. You have a role and are inspired to act if you choose to. And characters can acknowledge you in real time. And this, to us, is the power of storytelling in VR. So, thank you. Are there any questions? Or do we have time?
We actually have 5 minutes,
Perfect.
which is what a luxury for the first time today. So does anyone have questions? Please raise your hand so we can bring a mic to you. I'm trying to cover the whole room. Well, while you're thinking, there is one
Nope.
here.
Maybe I can speak loud.
Yes.
While you're working with narratives, and I assume you're writing a script and making an animatic, but how? Hi. Hello. Thank you for the talk. You work with narratives, and you make a script to see what the story is going to be. Then you make an animatic, I suppose, or
Yes.
But what's the next step? Are you then going to prototype, or how
Yes.
does this testing workflow works, especially with a story?
Yeah, so we actually do start with a script, like a traditional, paper and pencil script that has all the characters, just like what you would see in a film or television production. We then take that to 2D storyboards, and then we want to get everybody into virtual reality as quickly as possible. So we've started creating some tools to do storyboarding in virtual reality. And this allows Eric, our director, to very quickly see whether that script is translating well into virtual reality. And then we go through traditional animation workflows. We generally do our animations in Maya. We have a very custom layer coming out of Maya before we go into the game engine, and we use Unity right now for our last 2 productions. Their timeline features allow us to actually do a lot of kind of modeling that places everything in a 3D environment and then allows us to port very quickly. So that is kind of a very useful tool for us, because we did something for the first time with Crow that we haven't done before, is we created 3 separate SKUs out of it. We created a interactive VR, we created a 360 pre-render, and a 2D pre-render, a traditional 16 by 9 animated short. So all 3 builds were done out of Unity, which is a pretty interesting workflow.
Anybody? Oh, there's 2 here.
So everything I've seen is we're talking about linear story. Are you thinking about producing in the future non-linear story? So the
Branch narrative?
Yeah.
Yes. So I would say we like to call our Asteroids experience a emotional branched narrative. The resolution is still the same, but the emotions change. You're still hitting the same story beats. We are experimenting with some branch narratives. I think the challenge that you have with branch narratives is one, Eric always likes to say, it's hard enough to write one good story, let alone 5, 10, 15, 20, depending on how many branches you have. And the very interesting thing coming from the video game world that I come from, video games prioritize interactivity over story. And I can have arguments with some of my video game friends about whether or not video games make you cry and things like that. But it absolutely creates this kind of problem with pacing, the more interactivity you have in the experience. And the more branches, then you may lose that kind of dramatic tension and the ability to create certain emotional connections with the characters. So we're very concerned about what's the right level of interactivity, what's the right level of kind of branching to create something that's truly with a different resolution at the end. But yes, to answer your question, we are.
Question about the animations. In Unity, of course, you have like the rigs and Maya and the animation clips, but how did you do all these effects? Is it like scripted and with objects, or?
So for Crow, we used popcorn effects to create the effects, and we have a special effects supervisor who ended up, I think, doing some really incredible work with the kind of interactivity around the snow coming out of the hands and the trailers, as well as some really amazing stuff he did around smoke with the palace of the creator. But yeah, we had to use a plugin for Unity to get the effect that we wanted.
how was the name again? I didn't.
Popcorn effects?
Popcorn effects. Okay.
Yes.
Because animation Unity is pretty. Yeah.
Yes, it
Thank
can
you.
have its challenges. There's pros and cons for sure. And Popcorn Effects is from a French development company, I believe, Persistent Studios is the name of the company.
So we have time for one last question before we close.
Yeah, I was wondering, when people experience VR, they can either stand in a room or sit, and that maybe does affect the interactivity they can put to the piece. Do you put that in perspective to your scripts, whether they will sit or stand?
Yes, we do think a lot about that, and that's one of the benefits of going through a lot of user testing, is really seeing whether what we're thinking about ahead of time is actually working. I would say, for Invasion, our first one, there really wasn't a big room space. While you could do it in a real-time rendered experience, you could stand and look around the bunny, and you yourself actually had a bunny body that would squash, but it was meant to be a standing experience. It didn't really alter a lot when you sat. Asteroids had much more of a sense of space, and we actually had a teleporting feature, which I think was successful for some people who are more used to navigating around in a virtual world, but very difficult, or challenging for people who are not. So you end up seeing a lot of people just bumping the joysticks and just blinking over to another area and being like, whoa, where did I go? How did I get there? And so I think it really depends on the audience that you're going after as to whether or not that kind of room scale environment makes sense, and kind of how many degrees of freedom you want to give to people to go around. We do have, I think, some experience with people with Crow, given the length, it's 24 minutes. Some people just sat down on the floor and experienced it that way, and were quite happy. We actually had one guy lie down and start throwing snow over himself, like he was covering himself up with sand, and he just wanted to stay there all day. So that was fun. But not the intended experience. We are experiencing with some sixed-off experiences in a seated position to see whether we can actually craft something that is satisfying and accessible, both in a standing and in a seated position. But yes, it's something you can only, I think, really get to when you're testing it out to see if it works.
Okay, thank you very much. That was super inspiring.